So Mel Robbins is a viral sensation. She's a former lawyer turned life coach, and millions of people swear by her advice. But recently, there's been a lot of criticism online saying she's completely unqualified to give advice on trauma, on anxiety. So today, I'm putting my bias to one side as a psychotherapist and a hypnotherapist. I'm going to audit this episode of A Diary of a CEO. I want to see whether the halo effect, where we trust people just because they're famous, just because they're confident, just because they get millions of views, whether that halo effect is leading us to accept advice that might be incorrect. It might be incomplete. It might even be dangerous. So as I go through this episode, I'm going to be assessing three things. The psychology. Is what she's describing exactly how trauma and anxiety and behavior change work? The evidence, does it stand up to data and science, or is it just a good sounding story? And third, standard practice. If a client walked into a clinic, would that advice be appropriate, safe, or effective? Let's go.
What really breaks my heart is how stuck people are. There are things you can do to change your life for the better. And so let me give you the secret.
So before we go any further, I need to explain what is happening psychologically when people watch this episode. There is in psychology something that we call the halo effect. The halo effect is when we start to see somebody as an expert and we overestimate their knowledge, their impact, absolutely everything. So we start to follow them. They have a huge audience, they have influence, they have millions of views. So we start to see them as a godlike figure, as a cult-like figure, and we follow everything they say to the word. So what we've got here is we have Stephen Bartlett, who is a halo, huge audience, millions of views, etc. Mel Robbins has a halo, best-selling books, viral clips. Those two come together, which is deliberate. Every halo is looking for another halo to make their halo even shinier, even brighter. So we've got two halos coming together. You can see that it's got millions of views. So instantly, as soon as somebody clicks on their video, it registers as status, confidence, popularity. The numbers are there. And this isn't because the knowledge has been tested in that episode. This is just popularity. And we see this everywhere. Look at Donald Trump, for God's sake. There's nothing I don't know about grass. He says he knows about everything. He is an expert in everything. Nobody can be an expert in everything. That's how the halo effect works. Position and popularity replaces evidence.
Who feels like you don't ever have that moment where your intuition tells you it's that way.
So the first place I have paused is where Mel Robbins talks about intuition. Now, this episode is largely about anxiety, and anybody with anxiety cannot trust their intuition. When you have anxiety, you are hypersensitive to everything. You can have too much sugar in your tea, your chest starts pounding, all of a sudden you think something is wrong. When we have anxiety, we are hypervigilant, and our body signals that literally everything is dangerous. So if we were to listen to our intuition, we would never do anything. So your intuition really cannot be trusted. Anxiety reduces activity in the prefrontal cortex. So that's the part that's responsible for judgment, reasoning, and perspective. It controls your decision making. So you cannot trust your decisions or your intuition when you have anxiety.
anger, anytime those emotions come up in my body, it's just a directional signal from deep inside of you telling you you're supposed to pivot. Like, do not head in the same direction. Do not keep going the same speed. Make a change.
So this is quite a dangerous blanket statement. Clients are not encouraged to trust their intuition. Very often with a client, we have to teach them how to differentiate in what is safe and what isn't safe before we go on to any kind of behavior.
But for some reason, even though they know, every fiber in their body knows that this is not the situation for them, this is the wrong relationship, wrong job, wrong city, wrong friendship group, they still, for some reason, just can't take that step into uncertainty.
So when Mel and Stephen Bartlett are talking about stepping into uncertainty, and some people can't take that step. So that gap in between where you are now and where you think you should be, that anxiety is called cognitive dissonance.
Deep down inside, if you got really quiet, you knew that this was not the right decision for you. And so the issue isn't the accuracy of your inner wisdom. The issue is your courage in following it. Because
So Mel Robbins says that the issue isn't the accuracy of your inner wisdom, it's your courage in following it. So your inner wisdom is not always correct, as we have said, but the accuracy in following it. So when we decide something, so we are in a relationship that is bad, we will have the same behaviors in that relationship. Maybe we have an influence on whether that relationship is bad also. We follow the same patterns. But at some point you decide against that relationship and you opt out of the relationship. So the relationship naturally becomes bad. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So when it comes to actually you've decided you want to make change, the subconscious mind, or whether you want to call it the Neanderthal brain, whatever you want to call it, the old part of our brain, always wants to keep things the same. So we will live in the same familiar hell than try and change to something that might be amazing. The brain has the data on safe and familiar, even if eventually it will kill us. That's why people smoke. That's why people overeat, because the brain just wants to keep the same pattern. It has the data on it. It doesn't want to change.
Their story at this exact moment in time that will ignite something in you that is missing. And what is missing in you right now is hope. Because when you're stuck and when you are on a downward spiral, whether it's just in your own head or it's in self-destructive behavior, the thing that's missing in your life is hope. You don't believe right now that anything is going to make a difference.
So we're talking about cognitive dissonance for quite some time. What Mel says about hope, I completely agree with. People need hope. When people have hope, they feel like they are on the edge of something. So people will push harder if they have hope. And very often people work from what she's talking about here is desperation or inspiration. You either get so desperate that you have to make a move, or you get inspired by something that you make a move.
Can you tell the difference between someone who is likely to change and someone who isn't? Because there must be so many people that message you and they present a facade as if they have had that realization and they're about to change.
So Stephen asks her if you can tell the people who are going to change. I've been in practice for 30 years. It's the people that have hope, that leave, say, like a consultation and have hope. It's the people that take action straight away, or they have already made the decision. They are adamant that you are the person that's going to help them, and they are going to take that action instantly. They're the people that get the most change because they've made the decision. The other people might pay the money, but they haven't actually made the decision that they are going in on this. They're still sat on the fence. So it's actually a decision in their brain that this is the right time, the right path, the right person that's going to help me. She also says that change is painful and it's step by step and step by step. No, It doesn't have to be. It depends what change we're talking about. If you're talking about changing your entire life, but you can very quickly get rid of painful patterns within an hour. They are created in a second and they can be removed in a second. So, no, not all change needs to be painful and a long process. If there's lots of changes that you are making at one point in your life, then yes, maybe it is a step-by-step painful struggle, but not always.
Is this narrative that you have that you may not even be aware is talking to you all the time. And when you start to turn toward what that self-critic is saying, you know, you're never good enough. Why'd you screw that up? And you start to examine what it's telling you, it would be as if I was walking behind you, Stephen, all day long going, boy, you really suck and you blew that. And my God, you're never going to amount to anything and you're going to be alone and you're going to do this. And it's not, and we.
So Mel Robbins is talking about the negative dialogue that goes on in our minds for a good section here. The negative dialogue whereby we put ourselves down. Why did I say that? Why did I do that? Oh God, I'm never going to be able to do this. And how this feeds into our identity. And they act as if. There's core scientific evidence around this. The act as if is true based on the fact that behavior influences our emotion. Behavior feeds back into our emotional state. Also, new behavior creates new data. So as we start to see ourselves doing something different, the self-perception theory, we start to upgrade who we see ourselves as. So motivation isn't important. What is important is discipline, is doing the things even when we don't want to do them. That's where change and behavior upgrade is needed. Everybody comes into my practice. One of the main things is I want to feel more motivation. It's not going to happen. You have to take the actions. You have to take small actions even when you don't want to. So what we can do is install discipline through hypnosis to make sure you are taking the actions. That in turn upgrades the identity and you become a person that goes to the gym every day.
Would take. And what most of us, I certainly didn't understand that sensation, perception, feeling or emotion, thinking, and then action is the chain of events. That is how you're hardwired. This is how it works. This is how it works. It wasn't until I understood that, holy cow, if I don't reverse the chain, my sensation, my perception, my emotions about things, and my thinking, all 4 or 5 of those things actually precede what action I take. And I'm not in control of what I'm doing. My emotions and my sensations and my trauma and like all of the stuff that has been running on like autopilot forever, that is controlling who Mel Robbins is.
So Mel Robbins says that there's perception, emotion, and thinking and behaviors. That is not always the case. It is always context dependent. There is not a single correct order. So this is why treating thoughts alone often fail. Treating emotion alone often fails. Effective work targets the loop, not the step.
Your default response to everything, because every sensation triggers the exact same thing, which leads to an action of avoidance.
And the way around that is to flip that and start with taking better actions regardless of how you feel.
There's 2 ways around it. One is to work with a licensed therapist who can help you do the deeper work of understanding yourself and understanding your default thinking patterns and doing the work to challenge those assumptions and change the way that you think. That absolutely works.
So Mel Robbins makes a valid point. You can go to therapy. as I was trained as a counsellor, psychotherapist, very often people go to therapy, they talk through their issues, they don't actually make changes. You need something else to make the changes. So now I work primarily as a coach and hypnotherapist. I treat people that have already had the counselling, the psychotherapy, and have not got anywhere, and now they want the behaviour modification. So there is two different steps there. There is understanding the behaviour, which is the counselling part, and then there's the behaviour modification, which it would be executive coach or hypnotherapist.
Theory, this let them theory, which is kind of a behavioral technique, I guess. Would you describe it as a behavioral technique? No,
I wouldn't.
What is it?
So the let them theory.
So we are finally at the let them theory. So Mel Robbins has two interventions, the let them and the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is where you're in bed and you don't feel like getting out of bed, and you go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and on 1 you stand up. This is fantastic. It's a pattern interrupt. It's great. If you do actually get up at 1, if you do it the very first time and you do not get up at 1, it will never work again. It hasn't been installed. It's useless. So it depends on the person and how it's installed. By just doing it without any other method, like hypnosis, for instance, I'd say it'd probably be about 30% effective. So it can be effective. It's a tiny link in the chain. The let them theory is whereby other people are doing things that affect you, and instead of you reacting and responding to that other person's behaviors, you just say, let them, and you find your peace. Fantastic, great. Again, is a pattern interrupt. It's a pattern interrupt that kind of shifts you from thinking negatively. It's a bit like, instead of saying, I have to, I get to. Again, for a small amount of people, you are going to get a response from that. You are going to get some behavior change. But for the majority, you are just not, because there is emotion involved. You know, if somebody's talking about their mother-in-law, let them, when they are completely destroying their life, it's not going to be enough. You saying let them as they continue this behavior path, and you are reactive, your nervous system is reacting to that. Just saying let them is not going to cut it. There needs to be some kind of other intervention. So it's great as a pattern interrupt and a slight behavior modification. It is not a complete toolkit.
Landmark. I think it's very important to do an assessment or an audit of where you are before you jump into what's next. And I think this is the piece that everybody misses when they sit down and they write out a list of goals. The most important part of setting goals for yourself, I believe, is first understanding where you are. And there's a simple exercise that you can do. It's sort of like, if you think about directions, it's mathematically impossible to give somebody a set of directions unless we know your starting point and where you want to go. And most people pick their head up and go, I want to go there, without going, well, where am I right now? And so just take out a blank piece of paper and write out all the categories of your life. There's no formula for this, literally. You could do 10 different categories.
So Mel Robbins is talking about goal setting, about writing it down. The fact is, most people don't achieve their goals because they don't spend any time. It is just a pie in the sky wish. They think, this year I'm going to get fit. This year I'm going to earn more money. And they don't plan it. They don't do anything. So what she's talking about is just very, very basic coaching techniques, is planning it. What area of your life needs improvement, and deep diving into that area. The more you deep dive, the more you move the needle. When I work with high functioning people that are earning a lot of money, we really deep dive. There's no difference in the type of stuff we do. We just dive even deeper. So like an Olympic athlete, you know, a normal athlete will look at improving their diet every, you know, what they're eating, what they're drinking, their movement. An Olympic athlete will do exactly the same, but they will just dive to a much, much deeper level. The devil is in the detail. So when you're working with a high achiever, a high earner, we are just going into so much more detail because that's where we start to move the needle more. So writing a goal down is very, very basic steps on that journey.
Mark, do you think maybe if I have ADHD? And he puts his paper down, Stephen, and he goes, do I think you have ADHD? Of course you have ADHD. Think about, you know, the prefrontal cortex, this kind of part of your brain, really has the job of almost being like a conductor of an orchestra. This is the best example that I've heard in terms of what's happening if you have ADHD. And what's happening is if you think about an orchestra and the orchestra's warming up, right? And it's like, and the drums are ting, ding, 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 and people are shuffling in their seats. We know that sound, right? And then all of a sudden, the conductor's like, tip, 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 tip. And everybody's silent, right? In order to conduct an orchestra, you got to be able to do two things at once. You got to be able to lower the volume on the strings over here. And then you got to be able to amplify the focus on the percussion over here. And what happens when this part of your brain is not switching properly is you are like Mel Robbins in college, and I would be with my books, and I would be in the stacks at Baker Library at Dartmouth College, and I'd be there because I'm going to study, right? And my orchestra conductor cannot shush anything.
So they go on to discuss Mel Robbins' ADHD diagnosis. I have ADHD, so I can completely get that. The orchestra example was useful. It was a metaphor and it worked quite well.
Kids that go through some kind of interpretation of a stressful environment at a young age or a traumatic environment are more likely to have ADHD because they've learnt to tune out in order to sort of conserve and survive.
So people are starting to make claims already about ADHD, you know, connecting to childhood trauma, connecting forward to Alzheimer's. We are quite new in our exploration of ADHD. So at the minute, I am definitely on the fence. I know for certain I didn't have any young childhood trauma to cause my ADHD.
Menopause. You talked about menopause earlier.
Yes. Do we have to? I mean, Jesus. Okay.
Why?
What do you want to know?
Why did you respond like that?
You know, because it's really confounding. And it's confounding because I don't even know if that's the right word. It's overwhelming. Everybody my age is talking about it.
And now we are back to menopause, which obviously I am 52. I have the opinion there is too much awareness around anxiety, awareness around mental health, awareness around menopause. A certain amount of awareness is needed with everything. It's about balance. But as a woman that is in that area of my life, I feel like I am having menopause stuffed down my throat at every turn. Everything that goes wrong in my life has to be attributed to the menopause. This is just my opinion. I feel the more we talk about something, the more we deep dive into it, the more we experience it. So just like I have degenerative disc disorder, I forget that I've got it and I just crack on with life. I don't even think about it. So it doesn't impact my life hugely. It's still there. It's still painful at times. I have the same attitude towards menopause. Let's just crack on. So to summarize, some of what Mel says is useful. Some of her methods can create a shift change or a slight behavior or state change in the moment. It's a pattern interrupt. But as I've said, that is one chink in the chain. This needs installing. This needs reaffirming. This needs emotion removing for the whole process to actually function well as an intervention. So I suppose it's a mixed bag of good and bad. She is a life coach giving advice. That's what it says on the tin.